get started. We're going to talk about detoxing from heavy metals today. I'm Kara Jansen. I'm the owner of Radical Nutrition, which is my consulting business. I'm a holistic nutritionist and a health and lifestyle coach with a background in biological sciences and psychology. Okay. Awesome. Hi, Caroline. It's nice to talk to you again. So basically, I love to work with clients to cultivate whole health transformations through radical lifestyle shifts. And this is one of them that I love to help my clients move through. So basically, what is heavy metal or heavy metal toxicity, or even just regular toxicity? So the heavy metal group is some toxic chemicals and metals that are found commonly in a lot of things that we touch and put on our skin and we ingest and we breathe in. So things like aluminum, arsenic, cadmium, copper, iron, lead, mercury, and zinc are the main toxic chemicals that we can get into our system that can cause a lot of issues. And you can test your heavy metal toxicity or levels in your blood, your urine, saliva, your hair, different x-rays. So for example, you can test how much lead is in your body, because lead will displace calcium and you have lead lines in bone. So it's a way of testing how much lead is in your body. So just some of the ways that we can get different toxins into our body is very commonly from poisons, things like cigarette smoking. You get cadmium from pollutions in the air that we breathe, in the water sources that we have, and our food sources, which get into our agriculture, different plants and the pipes in our old buildings, or paint, sorry. Our drinking water, and not only do we get heavy metals in our drinking water, we also get different pharmaceuticals and different additional hormones in our drinking water because of the runoff and the throwing your extra medicines down the drain that get into our drinking water. And so the filtration systems have to be up to par to get those kinds of things out. Fish and the mercury, I'm going to talk about that a little bit as we get into the presentation. Different levels of mercury in different types of fish. So then the plants that are grown in polluted soils can be heavily laden with different heavy metals. And then just indoor dust in our homes, like asbestos, for example, in our schools and our workplaces. And one of the big ones that I'm going to talk about is cosmetics and all of the different chemicals that we can get just in the regular cosmetics that we use. So what can your body show when you have different levels of toxicity? This is a humongous list, and this is just some of them. Every body is different, and every reaction and different level of toxicity is going to be different depending on what kind of metal and what your body signs are. So from constant fatigue to stubborn weight gain, or stubborn weight that just you can't lose it at all, from bad breath to constipation to muscle and joint pain to irritability, that metallic taste in your mouth. You can get things like memory loss, depression, anxiety, fear, low energy, headaches, inability to concentrate. You can have any kind of system dysfunction, so cardiovascular, immune, respiratory, lymphatic system. All kinds of systems in your body can have dysfunction depending on the type of heavy metal that has been lodged into your cells and into your organs. You can definitely have neurological disorders. When we talk about the mercury, we're going to talk about the Mad Hatter disease and disorder. Yes. Okay. Sorry. I'm just going to try to answer questions as we go. But yes, the presentation slides will be shared as well. There is a recording of the presentation that everybody can have access to. So you can have anything from increased appetite to loss of appetite, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, and heavy metal toxicity is heavily linked to autoimmune diseases and disruptions in the body, insomnia, drowsiness, paralysis. So the list can go on depending on the body and the heavy metal that is overloaded in the system. So basically, you get the question of how come you don't feel bad right away when you have a metal in your system. Well, there's stages of toxicity that your body goes through. So if you're a healthy human and you are just lightly exposed to metals and chemicals, your body has a natural detox system that it can use to get rid of that metal in the body, and it has a natural ability to go back to homeostasis. So it has this built-in system of protection. But as you continually get repeat exposure, your body has this adaptive oxidative stress response where it's going to start experiencing slight health changes. So you're going to have slight chronic inflammation. You're going to have different infections that just don't go away. You're going to have allergies and different sensitivities that you didn't have before. You're going to have a loss of energy that is unexplained by different, like not just your stress levels and not just your lifestyles. It's going to be a deeper issue. So as your body becomes more and more and more overloaded with the toxins in the system and its ability to cleanse itself gets backed up or stagnant, you start getting these things like autoimmune dysfunctions where your body just starts attacking itself because it has lost its ability to recognize and eliminate the toxins. And then as your body goes into this autoimmune dysfunction state, your rate of cellular deterioration exceeds the rate of repair. So you start having chronic symptoms and exhaustion and accelerated aging and apoptosis, which leads to your chronic disease and a lot of really ill health conditions that all stem back to just having a toxicity level that your body isn't able to take care of anymore. So what happens when toxins get into your body? At the internal level, at the cellular level, you have your electron transport component. So that's your energy production ability. It starts to convert, it stops converting energy, so ATP, which reduces your cellular energy level, which ultimately affects your whole body, which is why you have that low energy or chronic fatigue experience. It starts to rapidly deplete your minerals in your body and amino acids in your body. So it diminishes your protein synthesis. So you're just not building, you don't have the building blocks in your body anymore. So a lot of heavy metals have the same binding sites, and this I'm going to talk about also a little bit farther. So they displace and deplete your minerals and your natural minerals because they have the same binding sites. It displaces calcium, magnesium, potassium, and which all affect your cellular movement. And it increases your cellular catabolism, so your breakdown. So you end up having more cell death and cell breakdown than building up. So you have oxidation of your low density lipoprotein. So you start having a lot more bad cholesterol in the body and bad lipoproteins in your body. And then you will also get things like acceleration of or alterations of like the cellular nucleic acid. So at a DNA level, your cellular machinery will be impacted and adapted. And then you're still going to start having premature biological tissue aging. So your cells are just going to die early, and your whole body is just going to prematurely age because it's lost its ability to repair and restore. So what else can they do to the body at a higher level? It's going to affect your absorption, your metabolism, the use of your essential minerals that you're going to be taking in, like calcium and iron and zinc. And it's going to essentially lead to deficiencies in these minerals, which are going to lead to health issues. So for example, like I said, these metals have the same binding sites for your essential metals that you need for metabolic processes in the body, which means that these toxins are going to now displace your essential nutrients, leading to deficiencies. So you would think that if you consume higher levels of minerals that you need, it can decrease the toxicity of the metals because the minerals will beat out the heavy metals in the binding sites. But studies have found that those who are consuming a calcium poor diet absorb more lead than those who have a calcium rich diet. And that makes total sense because calcium is a mineral that we need, and lead if you have higher lead concentrations, then it will displace your calcium, and it impacts your calcium absorption. So another example is iron deficiency can lead to an increase of lead absorption in the body and cadmium absorption. So if you don't have enough iron in your diet, you're going to end up having higher lead and cadmium levels as a result. Iron and arsenic have an antagonistic relationship. So that means that iron will compete with arsenic. So if you have sufficient iron in your body, it's going to mitigate the toxicity of arsenic. So you'll end up having less arsenic in your body if you have a sufficient iron level. And another example, calcium deficiencies can increase your intestinal absorption and your body retention of lead. So it's important to check your calcium levels so that you have enough calcium in the body so that you prevent lead retention and absorption. Okay, any questions? Yes, it does. Magnesium does get affected. I think I have something in here about magnesium in a minute, but if not, I'll get back to it. So we have metabolism and transport mechanisms in the body that get impacted. So minerals and metals, again, use the same transport mechanisms to do the same kind of metabolic functions, which means that they also, again, compete with one another, leading to health issues. So cadmium interferes with copper and zinc and iron, and it essentially will decrease the transport of the calcium into the intestines. Okay, and zinc can help clear out heavy metals through increasing the synthesis of metallothionein. However, toxic metals like cadmium compete with copper and zinc for binding to the MT, whereas cadmium can displace your zinc because it has a higher affinity to the metallothionein, which stimulates its synthesis. Okay, so there is a link between just your levels of zinc and copper and to the cadmium, and just how your metabolism will work and how transport across the cell membranes will happen, just because of the affinity to the binding sites. Okay, selenium protects against mercury toxicity, where you have the mercuric selenide, which is a compound in mercury and in selenium, and it is biologically inert and insoluble in living organisms. But heavy metals mimic your essential minerals and ultimately enter into your cellular membrane using the same transport mechanisms. And once they enter the cell, they have the ability to alter your DNA, your RNA activity, your energy production, and all the way up to at a genetic level. So you might have genetic changes that impact your health and in the future health of like offspring even. Okay, so just to highlight some associations and some disease risk factors of toxicities. So in a study, they were looking into lead exposure in children between 0 and 7 years old. And they found there was a negative relationship between lead levels and blood and serum calcium and iron levels. And we know that those are really important for bone development and blood development and growth in children. Okay, and so another study looked at children and found an inverse relationship between selenium and iron levels and lead levels. So lead exposure is really something that needs to be considered and looked at early in children if there is a risk factor, if their exposure is high or possible, to just check on the lead levels for their selenium and their iron so that we can ensure that their growth and development is optimal. Okay, children with the autism spectrum disorder have higher levels of toxic metals and lower levels of certain essential minerals. So, if, for example, one study found that there were samples for 11 heavy metals. Children had significantly higher levels than the control group. And they also had higher levels So in general, they also had higher levels of essential minerals, like including zinc and iron, sodium, magnesium, potassium, and sulfur. However, their levels of copper and calcium were much lower. The essential metal deficiencies that are caused by heavy metals are especially things like zinc, can lead to hypertension. Zinc deficiency can lead to things like inflammation, brittle and hard, inflexible arteries, and like high blood pressure. Selenium plays a role in the body's antioxidant defense system, and deficiencies that are caused by lead can affect your cardiovascular system, and reactive oxidative species. So taking the inflammation and the oxidative stress away in the body. And so in one study, researchers found that higher levels of cadmium and mercury in blood, urine, and scalp was linked to lower levels of zinc and selenium, even in those who did not have hypertension. And the roles of the essential elements and toxic metals were also lower. The ratios of essential elements and toxic metals were also lower in the hypertension patients compared to the controls. Okay, so there's lots more that I want to talk about, but I do want to get to some of the ways that we can prevent and eliminate them from the body. So I'm sure everybody understands that there's a serious impact on like all metabolic processes in the body, and especially the metabolic syndrome, which is one of those groups of conditions in the body that have high impact on a lot of chronic diseases. And so the higher levels of arsenic and lead in the control groups also had lower levels of calcium, magnesium, and zinc. And we know that those are really essential for muscle movement and neurological function and immune cells. And so we have the metabolic syndrome group also had higher levels of potassium and sodium in their hair analysis, but there was no difference in their cadmium, aluminum, and mercury levels, which is really interesting. And there was also a significant negative correlation between calcium and copper and magnesium levels and insulin resistance. Okay, so that just means that the copper and calcium and magnesium levels were much lower in relation to your insulin resistance, but there was a positive correlation between sodium and potassium. And then, again, in this metabolic syndrome group, the selenium was positively correlated with your fasting glucose levels, while calcium and magnesium were negatively correlated. Okay, so essentially, mineral deficiencies have a correlation with insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is an issue with the metabolic disorder and your ability to take the sugar out of the bloodstream and properly utilize it within your cells. And so especially magnesium, zinc, and calcium, which are most likely due to their role in the carbohydrate metabolism. So these are the deficiencies in somebody with metabolic syndrome that is associated with toxicity, with heavy metals, and your carbohydrate metabolism, which is related to your insulin resistance. So they're all related. And so when you have somebody that comes in that has a metabolic syndrome, always think about checking into a possible heavy metal toxicity that they might have that might be contributing to their condition. Okay, and so then more association. So we have an inverse association with essential minerals and toxic metals associated with liver cancers and cirrhosis of the liver. And then in one study, they found that supplementing with selenium and zinc provided some support for the liver of the patients with the liver disease. And the levels of selenium and zinc in the blood increased while the levels of arsenic and cadmium decreased after 60 days of supplementation. And so those patients had twice the levels of arsenic and cadmium compared to the controls. So it's amazing what giving your body the essential nutrients that it needs. It's amazing what your body can do with what it needs in order to function properly. So basically, let's talk about this mercury toxicity. When I mentioned fish, this was what I wanted to talk about because this is one of the big noise in a lot of research right now. So the mercury, which is a natural element that occurs in our environment, and it can and is also released into our environment through many types of our activities. But then there's methylmercury, which is very harmful to our nervous system and can cause a lot of issues within our body. Okay, so then this natural mercury is something that ends up collecting in our water sources, and it's turned into methylmercury in the water and the sediment, and that is what is present in the fish. Oh dear. Okay, so how can we get mercury into our bodies and into our system? So some of the big ones are like things like vaccine and our food and our air pollution and amalgam. So any dental work that you might have is all mercury, and that is just sitting in your gums and in your mouth, and that is getting into our nervous system. So at 50 micrograms, there's an indication of mercury toxicity with like finger tremors and things like that. And then as you get higher and higher levels in the body, you start to have serious brain dysfunction. You have things like depression, irritability, memory loss, central nervous system disturbances, kidney function dysfunctions. And then as you get higher and higher, you start having more serious inflammation in the kidneys, swollen gums, tremors, liver and brain dysfunction. Even especially, so when you're chewing gum and you have the mercury amalgams in your mouth, you are releasing 4 micrograms of mercury into your mouth every 10 minutes that you're chewing gum. So this is one of many reasons why I don't encourage gum chewing for a lot of individuals, regardless of mercury fillings in your mouth or not. It also affects your insulin levels. Another topic. So I have to move on quickly because we're going to be running out of time shortly. But some sources of chemicals in our everyday products, like our cosmetics, are things like aluminum and acetone, especially like nail polishes. We have the chemicals in our sunscreen. I know that's a big one right now because we are into the summer. We have the disodium EDTA, which is a penetration enhancer, but it's also, once it's into our system, it's a hormone disruptor and it mutates our cells. We have things like formaldehyde in a lot of our products that cause allergic reactions and dermatitis and headaches and chronic fatigue. Any kind of fragrance that's in our cosmetics are a chemical that our body doesn't recognize and know how to get rid of, and it alters our hormones. And so many more things in our cosmetics are things like lead and parabens and petrochemicals and phthalates and so much more, and talc. All of these things are going to disrupt our hormones. They're going to impact our immune system. They're going to impact our nervous system. And so getting into a more clean cosmetic lifestyle will be one of the major impacts in preventing heavy metals in our system. Okay, so what can we do to eliminate and prevent? So just a note to say here, most people think that our liver is something that does the majority of our detoxing, and yes, it does, but so much other systems in our body, like our kidneys, our heart, our ovaries, our testes, our brain, our lungs, our skin, our intestines, they all do contribute to our ability to detox and eliminate and prevent toxicity in our bodies. So basically what the biggest take home is just to decrease your exposure. Look for ways that you're ingesting potential toxins. You can really tell your relationship to a particular item or a particular food or a particular toxin when you take it away. And you start to feel better, or you start to see a change in your body. And then if you reintroduce it, you'll notice how sick you really felt. So taking things out of our routine and either seeing the response or introducing them again really dictates the relationship we have at a cellular level and an energetic level to those substances. So obviously, please don't smoke, and try to avoid secondhand smoke, which is also highly toxic. And even if somebody smokes and comes into the house and you are close to them and breathing it in, you're still getting secondhand smoke and the chemicals that are lingering on their bodies and in their breath. So check for lead sources in your house, especially prior to 1978, they used a lot of lead in pipes and paint. One really big important thing for most people to do is to get a good water filter system onto the house. And like, I know that's something that costs a lot of money, but it will, 1 ounce of prevention is worth thousands and thousands of dollars of future health. So water filtration at the source into the house, or at least at the taps that you're going to be using, especially what you're drinking, that helps to remove the heavy metals so that you're not like showering and getting the hydrochlorides that are being evaporated in the hot water, or the chemicals that are being absorbed through your skin, which is your biggest absorption organ. Get an air purifier for the house and just purify the air so that like at nighttime when you're sleeping for 8 hours, you're not breathing constant chemicals into your lungs overnight. So that's some simple ways. Might be a little bit expensive at the beginning, but it's worth it in the end. So we've all heard about this Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. So the Dirty Dozen are those that you need to ensure that you are getting organic sources, because if they're going to have pesticides, they're going to be sprayed, they're going to have just higher concentrations of potential chemicals on them. So your Clean 15 are the ones that you can reach for non-organic because of you don't eat the skin or the way that they're grown. Okay, so what else can we do? Limit your fish intake, especially the larger fish. So they are the ones that are going to be eating all the smaller fish, which have the higher concentration of the mercury. So it's like bioaccumulation. So eating some smaller fish to help eliminate or reduce your intake of mercury. There is protocols. So even like the EW Environmental Working Group has some protocols and guidelines on how types of fish and how often you should eat them to avoid mercury toxicity. We're going to talk about this, but I'm almost running out of time. So consume lots of turmeric and other spices that help your liver. So we're also going to talk about some herbs that are really helpful for eliminating and supporting your detoxifying organs. And they also provide protective agents and chemicals to the system to help protect our bodies from absorbing heavy metals. Eating a variety of color that provides you with phytonutrients and phytochemicals and antioxidants that help support your detoxifying pathways and increase your antioxidant capacity, so your neutralizing capacity. Boost your vitamins and minerals. So we know that heavy metals displace things like calcium, zinc, and iron, and selenium. So try consuming those food sources so that you have higher essential minerals to displace your heavy metals. This also helps to prevent the absorption of the heavy metals as well. Diets that are low in zinc and iron lead to your cadmium toxicity. So ensure that you have like adequate or sufficient or optimal levels of zinc and iron in the body so that you don't absorb the cadmium and lead, and that you can displace the cadmium and lead in the body. Supplementing is always an option as long as you're getting good quality supplements, and especially when your body is not at a point of being able to naturally take it from the food, supplementing could be an option. You're going to also ensure that you have adequate and sufficient vitamin D levels. Even though it is now summertime and we're going to be getting loads of vitamin D from the sun on our skin, it is important still to be taking in some vitamin D, especially because most of us live where we do, and we're not getting enough of it. And it's super important for a lot of the metabolic processes in the body and preventing or allowing the absorption of the other essential minerals that we need to displace the heavy metals in the body. So like the study from before about the children from 0 to 7, start early with checking the children with their heavy metal levels and their exposure and their toxicities, watching their cognitive functions and their physical abilities, because you don't want to disrupt their development because they're so impactable at this age, and it's easy to support their bodies with food and herbs before we having to go and reach to some chelating items. So just as an example, like the placenta cord blood has been found to have over 200 and something different chemicals and carcinogens and neurotoxins in their blood. So we know that it's getting across the blood, the placenta barrier, and transferring from the mom to the baby. So that's why it's also really important to start early and make sure that we can set those children up as best we can. So just a note on weight loss. Our toxins are stored in our fat cells. And so once you start to lose weight, you're going to be releasing toxins through that weight loss. And so it's super important to have a good elimination system. So having great bowel movements while you're losing